Good morning and welcome back as we continue Pastor Don's new sermon series, Mighty Mentors. As we concluded last week, I had to ask those that are sitting at the table with me if they would think about somebody who'd been a mentor to them and share that this week. And Roger Lane's going to share with us this morning.
Well, I'm from the country, and my parents were raised in the country. And out in the country, when you're not near a lot of city area and industrial area stuff, you have to take care of your neighbors. So my parents taught me as I was growing up, you take care of your neighbors. We used to take them to the doctor's visit, take them to the grocery store, get groceries. I remember having helped my daddy take this back seat of the car out, open up the trunk, we'd fill it up with wood, take wood to either black or white neighbors that needed some help to stay warm. And every time my dad planted a garden, as my wife could attest, it wasn't a little garden, it's more like a field, and you're raising big crops because we would raise enough stuff to share with our friends, neighbors, church members. We'd take it on Sunday at the church service, and everybody would open up the trunks and, okay, come get cucumbers, come get a watermelon, come get tomatoes. Everything was shared at our country church. And so my mentors were my parents. They took care of people. My dad would hear somebody close by that would need electrical work or plumbing work, and they would get an estimate from a place, and Daddy would say, that sounds like they're trying to rip you off. I can do that and won't charge you anything. So when I was growing up, I was the one that would crawl under the crawl spaces of houses, drag electrical wires, drag a pipe or a plastic tube for plumbing work, go through the attics, because I was the one that I was small enough to do it, young enough and agile enough to go over the rafters and miss the floor joists and don't bump your head, that kind of thing. So my mentors were my parents. My main mentor is Jesus Christ. And one of the songs I heard when I was a teenager was Others in the old red Cokesbury hymnal. And I'd like to read it to you right now because Susan found it on YouTube. Tennessee Ernie Ford has it on YouTube, but he only sings, I think, 2 verses of the song. It's 4 verses with the refrain. And I like to read it because that was my theme song ever since I was probably about 12 or 13 on my work doing helping people along. It's called Others. Lord, help me live from day to day in such a self-forgetful way that even when I kneel to pray, my prayer shall be for others. Refrain is, others, Lord, yes, others. Let this my motto be. Help me to live for others that I may live like thee. Help me in all the work I do to ever be sinners. Nope. Glasses. So help me in all the work I do to ever be sincere and true, and know that all I do for you must needs be done for others. Let self be crucified and slain, and buried deep and all in vain. May efforts be to rise again, unless to live for others. And when my work on earth is done, and my new work in heaven's begun, may I forget the crown I've won, while thinking still of others. Refrain again, others, Lord, yes, others. Let this my motto be. Help me to live for others, that I might live like thee. And in the Bible, you hear of Jesus talking and taking care of the physical needs of others before he would even get into a lot of theology or religious experience or getting deeper into their minds and their motivations for doing things. So he took care of their physical and creature needs before he would get them to try to sit and listen to what he may have to say. Because if you're not comfortable and relaxed, you're not going to take in anything that somebody is trying to talk about if you're not warm, well-fed, clothed, in fairly good physical shape. Of course, some of us may not be that way, but as long as they make spare parts, I can still keep going for a while.
Thank you, Roger.
And he does live by that.
Yes, I know that well. I had not heard that hymn before. Not surprised that Tennessee Ernie has. That's one of
Susan
his
found it
recordings.
on the
On YouTube.
YouTubes.
That's right.
Well, today, as we move on in this series of mentors, we move to the story of Deborah, one of the judges, and you find her story in the book of Judges, the 4th chapter, the first 10 verses. Actually, from this, all of the 4th chapter and all of the 5th chapter tell the story of Deborah's work with the Israelite people. Deborah was a prophetess, and she was considered to be one of the judges. Now, the word judge and the way it's used in the book of Judges is somewhat misleading. The word judge means, or is assumed to mean, a charismatic military leader, one who's able to rally the troops and get them to go into battle and to just pump them up, the cheerleader, and direct them in their efforts. Not necessarily the one who would stand in the front of the troops and go with the troops, but one who would provide the leadership. There are three main characters in this story that we find here in Judges. There's Deborah. There is the leader of the army, Barak, and then another woman comes into the picture towards the end of the story, and her name is Jael, and I'll say more about her in a minute. But Deborah was a prophet as well as a judge. She is unique also in that only she and Samuel are who are referred to as judges, are the only ones who there's any record of there being any judicial activity. In other words, deciding things for the Israelite people, deciding what's right and wrong, as we talked about last week with Moses, and he was getting overwhelmed with that. She's also unique in that she's singled out as a woman, and in the culture of this day, of this time of this writing, of Deborah's existence, women were property. They were not, did not have rights. The inheritance of property could not pass to a woman. It had to pass to a male heir, because women could not own property. So she stands out in that respect, that she's given this place of prominence, which means she had to be a very remarkable woman. Now, in the book of Judges, and as you follow that into 1st and 2nd Chronicles, and then 1st and 2nd Kings, which parallel 1st and 2nd Chronicles, there is a recurring pattern that happens with the Israelite people. They come close to God, and everything is good, as a life in harmony with God will provide. And then as they get further down the road, they start to turn away from that. The opening of the 4th chapter of Judges says that the Israelites started doing what was evil in the sight of God. You find that pattern, a roller coaster, repeated all through this period of Israel's history, of drawing close to God and then turning away from God, drawing close to God and turning away from God. Just as a tidbit, when you get over into the record of the Kings, there's a genealogy that's given with some of the kings. And in my last appointment, there's a lady in the church who made the observation that in the genealogy, the good kings, the ones who brought the people close to God, always their mother was listed in the genealogy. In the bad kings, the mother was not listed at all in that. That's just a tidbit that also points to the need for women to be involved in the ordering of society, I guess is what I wanted to say. So the Israelites had come into the promised land. They had been given the tribes had been allotted their part of the land, and they had scattered all throughout the land. There was no central unifying center that pulled them all together. There was this loose association of knowing that they all came from the same place and that they were kinfolk. But the Canaanites were still in the land and were oppressing the people. And Deborah had this vision from God that apparently she had shared with Barak, and he didn't do anything about it. And that was that God was calling the Israelites to action to do something about this oppression. The leader of this oppression was a man named Sisera. I'm not sure I'm pronouncing that right. It's Sisera. He was the main leader of it and of the military that was causing problems for the Israelite people. And Deborah had told Barak that God wanted him to gather the army together and go and do something about it. He didn't do anything about it. So she calls him out again, and it seems that while the first communication may have been more of a private communication, where the fourth chapter picks up, it seems to be a very public communication that she calls him out before the people. God's told you to do this. It's time to act. He wants you to go and gather 10,000 troops and to go out there and claim the victory that God's going to give to you. And he's still not willing to go, and he says, kind of meekly, it seems to me, well, I'll do it, but only on this condition. And that condition is that you go with me. And I kind of get the feeling that he's feeling one of doom here, and he's thinking, well, if I'm going to go out there and die, I want you to come with me. I'm not going to do this alone. If you feel this strongly about it, that God wants us to do this, if you're willing to come with me and put your life on the line, then yeah, I'll go out there and do it. And so they go out there, and they are successful. They rout the army, but Sisera manages to escape. And the story picks up that he escapes into a camp, and he finds the men are not there, and he finds a woman there, and he asks for aid. She recognizes who he is. She gives him some warm milk. He just asks for something to drink, and she gives him some warm milk. He's physically exhausted, and he promptly goes to sleep. And then what happens next is that she gets a tent peg. Now, when we say a tent peg, we're not talking about a little short peg that you would use to hold a tent, keep it from blowing away. Think in terms of a circus tent. You know, you got a peg like this that they drive in the ground with a large mallet. Well, she gets a peg like this, and she puts it on his head, and she proceeds to drive that peg through his head and kills him. And then when the Barak's army comes, and she says, well, the man you seek is inside, but he's dead. And Deborah had foretold Barak that a woman would be given the glory of the victory. And he probably assumed that that was going to be Deborah. But as it turns out, it was Jael. This is the only place this woman is mentioned. She's mentioned in reference to her husband. But she provides the victory for the people on that day. So we have these three main characters. And so I wanted to ask you, let's start with Barak. Um, who was mentoring Barak?
Deborah.
Well, it seems pretty obvious that Deborah is the one providing him guidance and providing leadership for his military leadership. Well, what about Jael? We don't know a lot about her, so anything we say here would be strictly a guess on this part.
I think Deborah. I think she probably influenced where the army was heading and had talked to Jael ahead of time and given her permission, so to speak, to go ahead and kill this man.
Yeah. I think Deborah very definitely influenced Jael. Whether it happened as personal as what you're relating there, or whether it was just through Jael knowing what was going on in the land and deciding that this was her part in it. But Deborah definitely, I think, has influenced both of these people, as she was influencing the Hebrew people. Well, what about Deborah herself? Who was mentoring Deborah? I think this kind of goes back to what you were sharing, Roger, earlier with the song there and the model of Christ. This is just me speaking. You won't find this in any commentary, but it seems to me very much so that Deborah's mentor was God. David is often referred to by God as a man after my own heart. I don't know that you could say that about Deborah, but the fact that she was a prophet indicates that she was communicating with God, and in turn communicating what she was understanding from God to the people. That's how she came to be referred to as a prophet. So she had a relationship with God, a very close and personal relationship that would, I think, put her in the same category as David, as someone who was after God's heart, or trying to order her life to be in harmony with God's heart. Maybe that's a better way of saying it. And I don't think that we often think in terms of being mentored. The effect that God and Christ have on our lives, or should have on our lives. Paul talks about going on to perfection in his letters. And as I've said at other times, that the word that is translated as perfection in the scriptures would be better translated as mature or complete. And so when Paul says that he's going on to perfection, he's meaning that he's going on to complete this journey to become that image of Christ, to complete that transformation, if you will, of his life from the life that he has lived into a life that mirrors that image of Christ. And that's the objective for all of us in living our lives as a follower of Christ, is to become that mirror image of Christ that reflects the light that is Christ out into the world. And so the only way you can do that, the only way you can be mentored, is that you submit your life and you allow it to be molded and shaped into that image along the way there. Well, you have any other comments as we wrap this session with Deborah up here this morning? Well, for the rest of you, I'd like to hear from, we have 2 more sessions in this mentor, some other comments from you about mentors in your life as we go on to next week. And for those of you that are joining us online, we're posting this ahead of time, so We hope that we'll see you in worship as we listen to Pastor Dawn and how she is going to interpret Deborah for us in the living of our lives. But thank you for joining us, and look forward to having you with us here again.